My guest today on the spot is Dr. Marc Faber, the editor and publisher of the very successful newsletter, the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report. He's up next, but before that, here's a sneak peek at a conference that we'll be covering next week in Las Vegas. Marc Faber joins us on the line now. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's start by talking about the recent movements we've seen in gold. Now, when the year started off, many seem to have given up on gold, Marc. We're disillusioned with the metal's performance. But since then, gold has picked up and has been rallying these past few weeks. How do you see the metal set up here?
Well, I don't quite understand why anyone would be delusioned by the movement of the gold price. The gold price was at $252 in 1999, and it went to $1,921 in September 2011, and now we're still at essentially over $1,300. So if you were halfway intelligent investor and you bought gold and silver when they were cheap in the 1990s, you still have essentially a five-fold gain.
But Marc, say if you weren't around at that time to buy gold, is there still an opportunity today, or has the boat left the dock?
In my view, there may be no dock anymore because we have a money printing environment, so we don't really know where to park our boat or car. My view is that gold overshot in 2011. We had a correction. During that correction, this is now September of this year, will be a 3 years correction. We had more money printing, more credit growth globally, more creation of millionaires and billionaires in the world, courtesy of Mr. Bernanke and now Ms. Yellen and other clowns at other central banks around the world. And all these people will eventually own some gold, because with all the money printing, nobody will trust paper money in the long run.
Now, Marc, we'll get to money printing in a second, but first, in a recent interview, you were saying how the media just doesn't like gold. Can you elaborate? Why is that?
The media has been talking down gold for a long time, as well as central bankers and a lot of strategists and economists that never owned a single ounce of gold. And the media wasn't bullish about gold. They were always essentially saying buy stocks and this and that. And so it's very difficult for them to admit that in actual fact, the performance of gold relative to financial assets since 1999-2000 has been fabulous. Moreover, nobody in the media will tell you that this year the S&P is up, say, 6%. But gold is up more than 6%. I think as of today it's up something like 11%. And the junior mining gold index, the GDXJ, is up more than 20%. So that nobody will tell you. They only say, oh, gold is a lousy investment.
Now, tomorrow we have the much-anticipated press conference by ECB President Mario Draghi. We had the ECB talk easing last meeting, and they cut a key interest rate below zero. That was the first central bank to ever do so. Do you think it's ideal for Europe to consider easing here?
Well, I mean, again, I tell you, the media and the Fed and other central bankers are brainwashing the public in fearing deflation, when in fact there is still a lot of inflation in the system. I don't know where you live, but anyone who lives in New York can tell you that his cost of living increases are more than 5% per annum. Now, again, the media will not admit it, but this is a fact. So we don't have widespread deflation at the present time. We have colossal monetary inflation that flows into asset inflation, that then flows into price increases.
And if we were on the verge of deflation, Marc, should it even be feared this much?
Personally, I don't follow the logic of anyone at the central bank saying, oh, deflation is bad, but inflation is good. I really don't follow that logic. There are many studies on the topic. The 19th century in America was in a deflationary environment during which prices fell. And real per capita increases for Americans rose at a faster pace than since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. If I get a salary, 100, and 5 years later I still earn 100, but the price level of things that I buy has gone from 100 to 200, I have a significant reduction in the purchasing power of my money. And this is exactly what has happened over the last 20, 30 years.
Now, once the tapering program will conclude in the U.S., how do you think that the U.S. economy will look?
I really don't precisely know, whether the tapering will be over ever, or whether at some point in the fall of 2014 they will say, well, we have to continue with the asset purchases or even increase the asset purchases over the next 1 or 2 years. I believe in one equation, the more the Federal Reserve and other central banks print money, the worse the economy of the typical household will become.
Marc, you're well-traveled and you've lived in many places. Where do you think it's the best place to live right now in the world in terms of economic prosperity? Basically, where do you have a shot?
I believe it's more a question of attitude towards work and what you want to achieve, and less a question of where you are. But I believe in general that provided, and this is a big proviso, provided there is peace in Asia, we will have a relatively high growth rate in Indochina, which is Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, and India. In that region, that we will have quite strong growth.
And before I let you go, what investments besides gold are you liking these days?
Well, I own some shares, and I own some bonds, and I own some properties. I'm not terribly excited about asset markets. I think most asset markets are either fully priced or overpriced. There's very little that is cheap. I own some Indian equities, and I increased my position in January, and that has performed very well. On the other hand, I also increased my exposure to Iraqi stocks, and that haven't performed well. In general, I believe the Middle Eastern situation is very bad, but I've seen many countries that went through very bad patches and the stock markets didn't collapse.
What about the other precious metals, silver, platinum, palladium?
They will all move in concert. I just wrote that I think at the present time, platinum may be the most attractive precious metal.
And any thoughts on that recent gold scandal we saw in China where the chief auditor discovered $15 billion of loans backed by falsified gold transactions? Any thoughts on that?
I think they should send these auditors who discovered that to the Federal Reserve and see whether there is still any gold around at the Federal Reserve.
As always, very insightful speaking with you, Dr. Marc Faber. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching this edition of On the Spot, and stay tuned to Kitco News next week as we head to Las Vegas to cover Freedom Fest. It was a huge success last year, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you can email us, newsfeedback@kitco.com. Thanks for watching.